In this video, we're going to show you to install the upper intake on your Ford F-150 located on the top portion of the engine. Before we remove our expansion tank cap here, you want to make sure that the engine is cool. That way there we have no hot pressure built up inside this tank. Just unthread that. Go ahead and set that aside. Using our 22mm socket, we're going to loosen and remove our lug nuts. With the lug nuts removed, grab your wheel, remove it, and set it aside. You want to go ahead and access the coolant drain plug right through the driver's side wheel well, up behind the bumper, and there's this red cap right here. Now you can normally grab it by hand to spin that counterclockwise. We're going to use a flathead screwdriver. Make sure you have a catch can or a bucket underneath to catch the coolant, as we're going to drain out that cooling system. Now if you want to, you can take a piece of hose and slip it over the port here for that radiator. And we're just going to drain this out until it's all done. Now we're pretty much drained out here. We're going to reach on up and remove the hose, and we're going to close up that cap. Pretty much close it up by hand. Make sure it's snug. And I'm going to go ahead and just clean up the residual coolant. We're going to disconnect our air intake tube here. There's going to be a few clamps. There's one here, one here. We're going to use our 7mm socket. You can also use a flathead screwdriver. On the back one here, I'm using my flathead screwdriver just due to clearance. Now that we have those three loose, let's go ahead and remove the sensor on the back of the intake tube. I'm going to use a pair of hose pliers, and I'm going to pinch the tabs here. There it is. Now we need to go ahead and disconnect the intake tube off of our passenger side turbo. We're going to go ahead and access it using our extensions here. This is our 1/4 inch with our 7mm. And we need to loosen the hose clamp on that. So we're just going to run up inside. Let's go ahead and loosen this clamp. That's all we had to do there. Let's move back up top. From up top, we're going to go ahead and disconnect our expansion tank hose here to that intake tube to that turbo. Pop that off. I'm going to grab this and just give it a little bit of a twist. Now I want to go ahead and remove our engine cover here. There's going to be two 10mm bolts. There's going to be one right here. And then over here, right behind the oil fill cap, there's going to be a little pocket down inside here. We're going to use our deep socket and extension to get to that. And that is deep enough where, if you can't get your fingers into, go ahead and use a magnet. Grab that. And we'll go ahead and get the other one over here. Want to get and lift up on this and pull it forward, lift it up and out. Now we want to go ahead and remove this hose right here. It's a U-shaped, and it goes from our valve cover to our intake. Now in order to disconnect these here, you're going to run your finger underneath and you're going to feel a little tab. Now the tab, if you push it one way, you're going to feel it move. If you pull it back, it won't go any further. You want to be able to go ahead and push that little tab away, and it's going to stop. Then you're going to grab the hose and wiggle this off. I'm going to go ahead and do the same on this one here. The tab is on the side over here. You might be able to go ahead and use a screwdriver, a pocket head screwdriver, to push on that tab and then wiggle this up. And this is what it looks like. Here's the little tab that you push on, and what it does is it unlocks this here. So when it comes back, all you have to do is, when you install it, just push it on, and it'll auto lock for you. Go ahead and set that aside. We have this other vacuum tube right here. Use our pocket screwdriver and push our lock tab out. Now that we have our lock undone here, we'll go ahead and slide this off. And just pull this back, set it aside. We have the red lock tab here on the electrical connector going to the side of our throttle body. We want to go ahead and release this lock tab. Now normally you can just use your finger in here to pop that out. You can use a pocket screwdriver to go ahead and pull that out like so. Now that we have our red lock tab out, on the back side here, I'm gonna use my pocket screwdriver. I'm gonna reach in here and just lift up on the little tab on the back side and pop that off. It's just a little tab right here. You're lifting up. Sometimes if you push down here, you can get it to release, but it's so tight between the coolant tube and the connector, it's hard to do, so you can just go ahead and pop that free like so. Just go ahead and disconnect our sensor here, and just have to push this white lock tab back. Use your pocket screwdriver, and then slide this back, and then pinch it, and disconnect. And do the same over here. There's a red lock tab. Now I'm pushing down on the little tab on the back behind the red lock. There's a little tab pushing down on. I'm just kind of working that off. Here we go. Now right in the center here, we have this little harness running through. There's going to be little retainers here. We do need to pop these off. Use my trim tool. There we go. And we have this wire harness here. Runs across as two tie straps here, with little plastic retainers. I'm gonna pop those up and off. Now this wire harness comes up and comes down right here. The lock tab is on the other side. So the lock tab, you just have to use your finger and pull it out. You can use your pocket screwdriver, pull that out. You're gonna pinch that and pull it off. So there's a little white lock tab on there. Now I want to disconnect this off of our EGR tube as well as this here. These have lock tabs on them. If you can't move the lock tab by finger, you can use your pocket screwdriver, lift it up, pinch it, pull it off. Do the same here. Lift up, pinch, and pull. Now we have that sitting in that little retainer. Use our trim tool. Good, pop that out. Now along the driver's side bank of the engine, we want to get follow this harness back disconnecting connectors. We have our VVTs here. Same thing, we have our lock tabs. These are pushed on, the harness itself is on a little retainer that pushes onto a valve cover stud. Pop that up and off. Have an ignition coil harness right there. Undo the lock tab, pinch and pull. And do the same thing going right on down. On the back section here, I want to lift up the tabs on our green connector here. Might be able to use your pocket screwdriver. Disconnect that. Disconnect the gray tube here. It's going to be a little push tab. Push lock on the other side. There it is. We have our back coil over here. Our third coil in the back. Push down that lock tab. Pinch and disconnect. Now this harness is held in by another one of those retainers on one of these studs on the back for the valve cover. There it is. Now on the black vacuum tube that we popped off the back side of our valve cover, there is another switch right here. We want to go ahead and disconnect this. And once again, this has a lock tab on it. Undo, pinch and pull. You go further down here. There's another connector we need to undo. Again, has a lock tab on it. It's orange. So push that lock tab out. On the back side over here, we have another harness we need to disconnect. Now on the rear portion of the intake, this is going to be this metal bracket, and this is what the upper engine cover fits into. I want to go ahead and loosen and remove the 10mm bolts here. Now underneath that plate, we have these 4 connectors. I want to go ahead and disconnect all of these. They're all going to have push tabs of some sort to go ahead and pinch and release. Now all of these connectors here are held onto the intake by plastic retainers. You need to go ahead and pop those off so you can use your trim tool. Now that we have all the connectors disconnected from the back of our intake, 2 of these harnesses right here, we need to pop off the back of the intake. And use our trim tool. I want to release these retainers. Now the 2 harnesses we just disconnected came off of this little tab right here. There's 2 little holes in here. We were disconnected that. Over here, there are 2 more we need to disconnect. Has the blue tape on it, and then the one right beside it. I'm going to pop those 2 out as well. I'm going to use our trim tool to go ahead and do that. And we're on the back side of the intake. It's tough to see. Make sure you use plenty of light to see what you're doing back here. I want to go ahead and remove this component right here. It's an 8mm nut right here. Loosen and remove that. With that 8mm nut gone off the front, we now want to go ahead and separate these 2 hoses. So we need a pair of pliers. Go ahead and use our hose pliers here. Gently grab and twist. Pop that off, set that aside. And we have our EGR unit right here. There's a 10mm bolt in the back and one on the top right here. I want to go ahead and loosen and remove both of these. These are clearly two different sizes. We have our vacuum tube coming over and it's attached to this other tube. We're just going to release it from the clip. Pop that off. Should get a little more flexibility out of that to tuck that aside. Now following the EGR tube around, there's a flange right here. There's going to be an 8mm nut here and there's one right underneath it. To gain access to that top one, I'm going to run a long extension over and underneath to get to this. Okay. Now that we have the upper one off, we have to get to the one underneath. The best way to get to that, I'm using a deep 8mm socket on my 1/4" ratchet. I'm going to try and be careful not to drop and lose this nut. There it is. Now before we remove the EGR unit here, we have two more bolts right here and right here. These are both 8mm. These bolts are the same length. Go ahead and set those aside. And grab our EGR unit. Slide that off the two studs over here. Pull this off. Go ahead and pull this out of the intake. And right beside the throttle body, you have this hose right here coming around. It has a green clip on it. We need to undo this clip and pull this off. Now there's two little lock tabs on each side. I found that using a flathead screwdriver, it's just you and popping two of these on one side, get it loose. I can do the same on the other side. Okay, once that clip is pulled up all the way, normally you can just go ahead and twist this and pull it off, just like so. Now follow the tube back. And it's going to bring us right to the back section right here. There's going to be a connector right here and another hose. We need to disconnect both of these here. This one here has a white locking clip on the side. You need to release that, and we're going to pop that off. And then we're going to go ahead and release that blue locking clip here and slide that off. Going to release that white locking clip. Pinch and release. Then we have the blue clip. There we go. I'm going to slide this component up and off of the metal bracket that it's sitting on. And I want to go ahead and pull this off. Now we have our coolant tube running down the passenger side top of the engine. There's going to be an 8mm bolt on the back here. And then on the other side of the tube towards the front, there's going to be one over here. I'm going to go ahead and get to that back one first. And let's get to that front one. Remove both of those and set them aside. Now on the intake portion here, we have two hose clamps. You can loosen and remove either one of these here because we just need to separate the intake tube here from the throttle body. I'm going to choose to go ahead and do the inner one here by the throttle body using a 7mm socket or a flathead screwdriver. Now if this works properly, you should be able to wiggle this. Using our 7mm socket and driver here, we're going to loosen the lower intake tube. I'm going to go ahead and get the lower hose clamp. I'm going to rotate our tube up and out. Go ahead and work that bellows off. We'll go ahead and pop the clip off of the lower tube to the intercooler. Slide this off. Now we have our coolant tube right here. We'll disconnect this hose clamp here and the one on the back. Use my hose pliers. I'm going to go ahead and break this hose free. Sometimes these hoses are a little stuck on there, so you can use a pick. Sometimes work your way around that hose. Now I'm going to go ahead and work that rear hose off. Using your trim tool, I'm going to go ahead and separate this harness from the coolant tube. Now on the driver's side front of the engine here, we have the other end of that heating hose or the coolant tube. Now this is a locking clip. There are little pinch tabs. There's one on the top here, one on the bottom. You're going to pinch those together and then grab the hose and pop that off. Spin that off to the side. I'm going to pull our coolant tube back. And we can swing this off to the side. Now we're going to unbolt our intake. There are a series of 8 bolts. There's one in the back left over here, over on the back right. There's one right here. There's one right behind this pedestal right here on the back. There's one here, here. There's one right here, and there's one right on the front, right behind the throttle body. Using our 8mm socket and extension, I'm going to go ahead and loosen and remove these. And these are capture bolts, so they won't come out. Go ahead and lift up on the intake. Now we have our vacuum hose here in the middle, so just going to gently lift this up. Now that we have the intake off, we want to go ahead and focus on the lower portion of the plenum here. And each one of these ports here, you want to make sure that they're clean so that the rubber gaskets from the intake have a clean surface to mate to. I'm going to go ahead and use some spray solvent on a rag. It's always good to be wearing safety glasses when using chemicals like this here. And we want to go ahead and wipe away from the intake port, so we don't want to drop anything down into the intake. Wipe around the perimeter, make sure it's nice and clean. Once you're satisfied with that, go ahead and move on and do the other 5. Now I'm going to go ahead and take some clean rags, and I want to go ahead and put them on the intake ports here. Our goal is to prevent anything from falling down inside of the intake while we're servicing this. Now that we have the intake off, we now want to go ahead and remove our throttle body. There's going to be 4 8mm screws that hold this to the intake itself. It's 1, 2, 3, 4. Just going to use our socket and extension. Go ahead and loosen and remove these. Slide those 2 out, grab the 2 on the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and remove the throttle body. One thing you want to pay attention to is the gasket right here. You want to make sure that's in good condition. And how to tell that is you're going to set this into the intake. Press that into place. And what you're looking for to make sure that that gasket sits higher than the plastic around it. That way there we know when we install the throttle body it's going to seal. Now that we have our throttle body off, let's get it and remove our map sensor. This is the same 8mm socket we're using. Going to remove that. And all you got to do is twist this out. It's just a rubber O-ring that helps seal that. Work that up and out. Go ahead and install your map sensor. Press that down, line that up. Go ahead and install that screw. We just want to snug this down gently. That's it right there. Make sure that the O-ring gasket is fully seated. Go ahead and line up the throttle body. And we're going to go ahead and get these screws started. I like to go ahead and get them all started before we snug them down. Once you get all these started, we're going to go ahead and snug them down in a crisscross pattern. Let's go ahead and snug these down. Just snug them down gently. Just double check that first one there. And this last one, here we go. Now on the bottom side of the intake, you want to make sure that you have your gaskets installed. Now what you're going to do is you're going to take the gasket, line it up, and simply press it into position. You're going to have one of these gaskets per port. Go ahead and repeat this process for the rest of these. All right, let's bring the intake back and in. Now installing the intake, it's always key to make sure that the rubber gaskets stay in place. They're pretty much a self-locking unit once they're pressed into the intake, and they require no RTV or any other sort of sealant. I'm going to go ahead and get all of these bolts started, and then we'll come on back and snug them down. Now that we have all these started, what we're going to do is we're going to run these down, but we're just going to seat them. We're not going to tighten them. All right, once that's bottomed out, I'm going to come up front here and want to run these down. Now that we have them all seated, let's come back and we're going to torque them down next. Now we're going to go ahead and torque down the bolts. You want to follow the pattern on the screen. And the first time around, what we need to do is torque them to 44 inch-pounds or 3.6 foot-pounds. So that's the first pattern around. Second time, you have to do 89 inch-pounds or 7.4 foot-pounds. Now go ahead and repeat this process on the second round to 7.4 foot-pounds or 89 inch-pounds. Bring that coolant tube over, bring our harness forward, and want to go ahead and get our hose onto the coolant tube. Sometimes spraying the tube itself with some spray solvent will help that slide on a little bit easier. We do want to make sure that the hose itself is right up against the flange. Once that hose is up against the flange, we can now move our hose clamp back up into position. Now, upon trying to install our hose clamp here, it had broke on us, which is very important. You want to pay attention to the condition of your clamps. You don't want to run into an issue like that there on the road. So we simply had to source a replacement hose clamp. Go ahead and snug that down. We want to install our bolts here for our tube. One goes on the front side here. I like to get these bolts started by hand because you're threading them into plastic or inserts here, and you don't want to cross thread these here. And once you get them going, go ahead and snug them down. Snug them gently. They don't have to be super tight. Once they're bottomed out, you're pretty much good. Go ahead and install this harness right here. You can plug this in to the side of your throttle body. Line that up, push it on. You're going to hear it and feel it click in, and then push that lock in. Let's go ahead and connect all of our connectors on the back side here. Now, all of these here will press into the back side of the intake manifold, but on the back side of these here, they have the little plastic retainers that need to pop into the retainers on the back side. Then start to lock these into place here. And on the back side, we'll pop those into the tabs. And take a little vacuum line here and press these onto the intake. Let's install this component here. Slide this back, and it's going to fit onto the metal bracket on the back side here. I have this line on the back. And to install this here. And before I pop that on, I'm going to give it a quick spray with some spray solvent. It's going to help it slide into place a little bit easier. All right, push the lock in, secure that. Now at this point here, we can start to connect all of our electrical connectors. We have a couple of vacuum tubes here. I'm going to go ahead and line up the harness onto the retainer tabs. and get those pushed on. On the back side, there's a harness connector here, and I'm going to press that on. Now what we're going to start to do is line up our ignition coil wires and get those connected. Don't forget the connector on the back of the sensor back here. Line that up, push that on. When you're connecting these here, always just give them a little tug outward and make sure that they are locked into place. Any of these connectors that have orange, white, or red lock tabs, be sure to lock them in place when you install. Now, if you're finding that your clips aren't popping on, it probably means that the hose or connector is not all the way on. This stands for these colored plastic clips as well as the locking tab connectors. I'm going to install our back bracket here for the engine plenum, the engine cover that pops into the back here. Snug that gently. We'll start to install our EGR unit here. Slide that into position. Now, installing the EGR, you want to make sure that the gasket itself is still on there and in good condition. If it's in poor condition, it looks like it's damaged or rusted away, you want to go ahead and replace that gasket. Now that we have that lined up, we are going to install the two flange bolts here. Now, installing these two bolts here through the flange, you can go ahead and take this tube here and you can kind of twist it a little bit to go ahead and get these holes lined up on that flange. Once you do, go ahead and run those bolts in and go ahead and snug them down. And make sure those are good and snug. I'm going to install our bolts here. There's a longer bolt here, shorter bolt goes on the back. Now that we have those started, we're going to go ahead and snug them down. Line up a connector here. Install the connector for your map sensor. And then we have this here. Gonna line up the hoses, work those down and on. Go ahead and get that nut started here on that little stud. Let's go ahead and snug this down. Plug that in, press on your lock tab. We're going to move our hose clamps down into position here, and then the one beside it. All right, perfect. Now that we have all of our coil wires hooked up, you want to pay attention to this one here. This is the one that goes to the plastic tube. Now, this here will also plug into your ignition coils. So you want to be careful not to get this mixed up. And how to know is that down below, we have the connector with the orange clip on it that locks in. And this has a Y on it. The harness itself is attached to it. So these go together. And go ahead and line this up. Line that up, push it on, and then lock it. Go ahead and install the harness here for the EGR and the sensor. Install this tube on the top here. Go ahead and get your lock tab installed here. Go ahead and install the little clip retainers. Install the nuts down on the lower EGR tube. All right, let's go ahead and snug those down. All right, once it's bottomed out, give it a little bit more, and then we're going to do the same for the lower. All right, snug that down. I'm going to come back and just double check the upper one here. I'm going to install our tube right here. I'm going to rotate this so that the lock tabs line up with the notches. Install the crossover tube here. And take the intake tube, line this up on our throttle body. Work that into position. Go ahead and install the bellows there. Now when you do this here, you're not going to have enough room to fit that here. So what we're going to do is we're going to loosen and remove our 15mm bolt. Now that we have those attached, we can at least get our bolt in and snug that down. Pop that into place. Install your collar here. It needs to fit inside this little groove. Okay, so that snap ring is flush all the way around. Go ahead and get your clamp lined up. You want to snug these down. All right, let's move up top. Tighten down my throttle body hose clamp. Make sure it's good and tight. Just double check the other one. On the side of your intake tube right here, if you happen to have this hose that comes over and goes in, you want to go ahead and reattach that. Ours was modified by someone previously, but you want to go ahead and reconnect that hose if yours is separated. I'm going to install our air duct here. This end here goes on to the turbo itself. A little bit further up, there's a plastic post. This is going to get pushed into a rubber grommet that's pretty much right in line. So once this goes onto the turbo, just push this down into the rubber grommet. Once we have the air tube in place, we can now install our tube here that goes from the air filter box. Line everything up here. And once we're satisfied that everything is connected here, let's go ahead and tighten down the 3 clamps. Now that we have our intake tubes installed, go ahead and install the intake temp sensor. You can hear it and feel it click into place. Let's install our upper engine plenum. There's these 2 tabs right here. They're going to line up with the bracket on the back side of the engine. Now it's installed. Install the 2 10mm nuts. We'll have to thread that one down as far as we can by hand. Let's install the other side. Now installing this one here, it's hard to get your hand down inside, so I will stick the nut to a magnet, lower that down. Once I have that started, I'm going to come back and snug that down. And then we'll tighten down the other side. Now we're going to tighten down the air tube to our turbo. You do want to make sure it's good and tight. Line it up on the studs. I'm going to go ahead and get all of our lug nuts started. Once they're all started, we'll go ahead and snug them down. We're now going to torque down our lug nuts to 150 foot-pounds. When doing this here, you want to do it in a crisscross or a star pattern. Let's go ahead and open up our expansion tank here. And we want to go ahead and fill this up using the appropriate coolant recommended by the manufacturer. Go ahead and use a clean funnel and fill it up. Now at this point here, everything is filled down below and our expansion tank has a max line on the side of it. So just fill this up to the max line. I'm going to go ahead and seal this back up. Now you want to go for a road test. You want to run it for about 15-20 minutes. Let that thermostat open up and start to circulate the coolant throughout. Come on back. Check this out. Do not open this here when it's hot, but you want to check the max line. Make sure that that is at the appropriate level. If not, wait for this engine to cool down, and then you go ahead and open this up again and continue to fill through the expansion tank. Remember, never open this when it's hot. Seal it up, and you're all set.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.